Why hello there, I'm your guide for this video, Curtis. In this short video, we'll be exploring some cross-cultural communication issues that Chinese students could face in an English school environment. Now, before we get started, let's take a look at these numbers here. This statistic looks at the percentage of where international students come from in their educational institutions. It is to no surprise that in all these three most popular countries for school destinations, most of their international students are Chinese. In Australia, it is 33.5%. In USA, it is 31.2%. In UK, it is 19.1%. In this video, I'll demonstrate these cross-cultural issues and story scenarios so that we can look at them in a more interactive and interesting way. All these scenarios that I'm about to show you are created based on interviews that I've conducted and some of my personal experiences as well. And of course, some extent of creativity is also an important element in creating these scenarios too, right? This video will be divided into three sections. The first one is to take a look at how issues of cross-cultural communication could be seen in a classroom setting. For example, how differently might a Chinese student react to a question asked compared to the rest of the class. In the second section, we'll be looking at the same topic, but about issues in developing and building relationships with other people. For instance, how usage of language could create a misunderstanding, which could eventually break relationships. This is no doubt an important aspect of learning and studying at school. The third section will be on stereotyping and how to resolve and avoid these cross-cultural communication issues in the future. And lastly, we'll wrap things up and review the key points mentioned in the video as well. The first section, classroom setting. Before we begin, let's take a look at this interview about Stephanie's experiences on communicating with other people. The issue that she will touch on here concerns mainly about the use of body language and differences in communication styles.
When I first came to Sydney, I actually had a pretty hard time communicating with my friends from here, mostly because I feel like there is a communication difference between us. Personally, I feel like their talking style is pretty direct, unlike the Chinese culture, for example, where we try to say stuff in a more direct way. So sometimes it appears to me that they might sound a bit rude. I know they don't mean it that way, but you know. I remember one time when I was in my tutorial group meeting with my tutor. When the tutor was speaking, I was actually listening to her, but I didn't really keep a lot of eye contact with her, because I feel like if I keep my eye contact with her for too long, it might appear to be inappropriate and disrespectful. After that, I realized that keeping eye contact is actually very important in showing that you're actually paying attention to the speaker. So I was a little bit embarrassed after knowing it.
So when I come to Australia, I noticed the cultural differences in classrooms are very different from in China. When I'm in China, we never talk in class, we never ask questions, and we always work by ourselves. But after I come to Australia, I noticed there's a lot of group and class discussions and a lot of teamwork projects. And because I'm not used to this, I didn't participate a lot in discussions. I was mainly very quiet, and this actually reflected in my report card, and I had a very low effort grade as a result of that.
Now in here, the interview mentioned two really important aspects, which is the classroom custom, where everyone knows that eye contact is essential, for example, and it is not like what she was thinking, as well as an example of differences in learning styles. Another aspect is the communication style, where it is considered that typical Chinese communication is known to be more indirect. Therefore, sometimes the directness that Stephanie is not quite used to could be taken as rudeness as mentioned. In here, I actually want to elaborate a little bit more on the communication style mentioned. There are some theories out there actually compares the communication styles between cultures. For example, Edward Hall's theory mentioned that high context communicator will tend to talk indirectly, while low context communicator will tend to talk directly. But of course, everyone's different, and this theory should only be seen as a reference. Now let's get right onto it. Action! The first character we have here is Xin, who is a Chinese student who studied in China for almost all of his life. Mr. Hogan is a local teacher, and Chase is a local classmate of Xin. Does anyone know the answer? I do! Wow. So what happened? What went wrong? When answering the question, Xin raised up her hand and stood up trying to give the answer. However, after Xin stood up, her classmate Chase and even the professor felt a little bit shocked. It is not because Xing did something wrong, but rather this act is pretty unusual for them. In Xing's perspective, standing up when answering questions is to show politeness and respect to the classmate, and to the teacher as well. Politeness is one of the most important aspects in Chinese culture. However, the body language of standing up could be seen as over-exaggerated to other people. Xing didn't know this until everyone looked at her and felt shocked. Coming to a different environment, Xing should try to learn more about the local culture and try to adapt to the culture. The classroom custom here is different from what she expected. And here, raising her hand before answering the question could already represent politeness. Too much of a body language might have an adverse effect in some cases such as this one. The second section, building and developing relationship. Once again, let's take a look at some interviews regarding this topic.
After arriving senior, I actually experienced a little difficulty in terms of communicating with others, classmates, because my English is not that good. Like when I am speaking to some of my local friends in English, sometimes I would mix up the tenses of past tense and present tense. Yeah.
So in China, we are expected to be very, very polite, especially to members of the staff. So I remember when I was first in Australia, whenever I see teachers, I always say, "Oh, good morning, Mrs. Smith," or whatever. So I was very surprised when I didn't see other students doing this. Sometimes they would just say hi or hey like that, very, very casually, which surprised me a lot.
And here, one of the two main aspects mentioned is language proficiency, how the lack of ability in language communication could cause embarrassment or even miscommunication. And another aspect is politeness in different cultural view, once again, which could cause embarrassment if used inappropriately. A really interesting point that I want to elaborate here relating to Li Xing's experience about learning styles is that there's actually an interesting statistic looking at how differently Chinese students and Western students prepare for the exams. In the statistic, it states that Chinese students would prefer working alone, while Western students would prefer working in groups. Well, once again, it's like I said earlier, this might not be true for every student, but it is appropriate to look at this as a reference. Now, let's jump right into it. Action. Chen is a Chinese student who are not very good at English, and Ron is Chen's newly met friend at university. And Ron is local as well, and they're planning to have some tea together during class break. Hey, thanks for inviting me to have some tea with you. Not at all, buddy. Let's order something, shall we? Can I take your order, please? Yeah, sure. Here it is, enjoy! Your burger looks yummy. Hang on, you ordered a cup of tea only? I just had lunch, I thought we were having a tea break. Wait, I thought we were going to eat a lot, right? Isn't tea means eating food? I wonder what he means. Tea's tea. So what went wrong here? What is going on? When Ron invited Chen to have tea together, Ron just wanted to grab a coffee or tea while Chen thought they were going to eat a lot of food. The reason behind this miscommunication is an understanding is due to lack of English proficiency. Assuming that Ron asked Chen, "Let's have some tea together," which is a very normal phrase to express coffee drinking or tea drinking, or just in general having a tea break. However, the direct translation of having tea in Chinese means that they are at least going to have a meal, if not a lot of food. Both Ron and Chen did not realize that such simple term would contain cultural meanings, and through language use, Chen thought tea means food, while Ron thought tea was just tea, which led to misunderstandings for both parties. Last but not least, stereotyping and solutions. The last interview here was an interview from a teacher in Hong Kong from a language department.
In the school that I'm currently teaching in, sometimes I will be assigned a couple of students that are non-local and do not speak Cantonese as their first language. They do speak Cantonese, however, just not as fluent. Remembering the first time when I was assigned for 2 Filipino students to study in my class, at first, I actually thought there would not be any problems for them to fit in. After all, their Cantonese seems to be pretty fluent. However, what the problems really is not really the language barrier itself, but the differences in communication styles as well as the cultural differences between them and the rest of the students. For example, in our school, there are some commonly understood rules that every student will follow. One simple example is, if you meet a teacher in the hallway, you should greet the teachers and bow your head slightly to show your respect and politeness. Also, it is not polite to call teachers by their first name. Some minor issues like this could create misunderstanding and, at the end, affecting relationship. Now, to the topic about how these international students blend into the classroom, things like a buddy system would help them to blend into the classroom easier. As a lot of time, this student would feel left out from the rest of the class. I believe that the education and teaching system would also be different. Like in here, the student would often be quiet during class, and they do not talk much. When preparing for exams, students usually prefer to work by themselves, which some international students might prefer to work in groups. See how here, not only language aspects, cultural differences also played a really important role in interactions and communications, especially between students coming from a different cultural background. To be fair, I believe that having a multicultural studying environment would benefit students as they get to look at different culture in a way broadening their horizon.
After a relatively long interview, let's get right into the action and look at the scenes. The main characters here are Ying Yik, which is a Chinese student, and there's Kenny and Mo, which are local and are classmates of Ying Yik, and there's Miss K, which is a local teacher as well. Hello class, let's do some maths questions today. Who can tell me what is x in 2x plus 3 equals 7? Oh, we don't know. Well, I know someone who would definitely know. Ying Yik would know. Asians are elites with numbers. I don't like them stereotyping me like this. This is not me. From this scene, it is actually pretty obvious to understand what is happening, but why did it happen? Stereotyping is a common method used to quickly judge someone. Oftentimes, these stereotypes are related to cultures and are created based on a typical concept of the culture. In this case, Asians or Chinese are always known as being good with mathematics. Some could provide scientific proof of this, and some just read it from media platforms as jokes. Whether or not this is true, stereotyping oftentimes could hurt someone unintentionally, as this misconception is no different as categorizing someone into a category that they believe they do not belong to. Ying Yik in this case could feel pressured due to this stereotyping and could feel labeled for something she's not happy with. Combating stereotype is essential in looking at cross-cultural communication issues, and most of the time it comes from a lack of understanding. To combat inappropriate stereotyping, both parties need to take action, not just one. The first step is to increase understanding of the culture. The most simple way to achieve this is by reading books from library or from online sources. Before judging someone or making assumptions about someone, most of the time asking a person about it directly would be the best, as after all, every single individual is different. To conclude, the first section talks about cross-cultural communication in a classroom setting. This includes class customs, such as the differing extent of eye contact required in different cultures, and cultural expectations, such as keeping quiet in class compared to actively contributing to discussions. The second section talks about cross-cultural communication regarding to building relationships. There are different aspects and concerns in building a healthy relationship, some of which are communication styles, body languages, and as well as language proficiency that could cause misconceptions. Words that have cultural or linguistical meanings encoded, such as tea as shown from the example, as well as frequent usage of slang languages by local, can leave international students confused. The final aspect of cross-cultural communication is stereotyping and solutions. For instance, seeing a Chinese or Asian student as nerdy simply because they're Chinese or vice versa. Stereotyping is shallow and reflects a lack of understanding for different cultures. This presentation regarding cross-cultural communication issues faced by Chinese students in universities aims to raise awareness of some issues mentioned and to promote a healthy understanding and acceptance for people of all races. And this will be the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching.